artists need references. This is an indisputable fact for anyone who's striving for consistency in what they're doing. When you're just starting out, however, or when you've been stuck in a sort of limbo wondering, how the heck do I improve this? That's when the big question comes up. What makes a good character reference in the first place? Just for a little context, I did a character design challenge where it led me to making this guy. In addition to a tight deadline, I stopped working on it as I didn't actually know how effective it was as a reference. Sure, I could polish it more and maybe make some tweaks here and there, though I actually wanted some definitive answers for what to keep in mind beyond just doing things because I've seen it done before. Thus, my silly little mission began. After collecting some tips and hosting a little workshop stream with Charlie here, I was then able to put together my findings for everyone here to enjoy. Just to clarify, this is a broad overview of the topic, so if you would like anything explored further in depth, or you'd like to share some of your own knowledge, please go ahead and leave a comment. Let's get started. My primary experience with reference sheets nowadays comes from ArtFight, though when you're in the world of VTubing, you end up getting exposed to platforms like VGen as well. With just these two locations, you're going to get a lot of range in terms of how a reference might look. You might have a variety of assumptions, as did I, regarding what makes a good character reference. Though from this journey, I realized that there's a series of questions an artist needs to ask themselves in order to better evaluate what makes a good reference for them. Here's our first one. Is it more personal or professional? Just to get this straight, personal means something you do just for fun and that may not require as much consistency, either from you or people using it. Professional, on the other hand, can mean creating something as a commercial product, one that either reflects the project itself or as more of a showcase piece for a portfolio. ArtFight and Toy House leans more fun over places like VGen or ArtStation, where you're more advertising a skilled service. Even as an independent, professional can mean putting greater care into the behind-the-scenes work for your project, as who knows who's going to be checking out later down the line. To really kick this off then, you're going to need to check in with the seriousness of the project, and whether you're aspiring to work with clients or to carry out your own vision. And hey, it's not to say every single art ref you create needs to be high effort. It's more of a case-by-case basis for what it's actually for. Let's do a check-in with my project. In truth, while I do intend on featuring this character on ArtFight, I actually wanted to put more effort into it, more as a learning opportunity for commissions I may like to offer. Not just that, but it'd certainly be nice to depict my characters with greater care, given that I do have an interest in storytelling, even if I'm enjoying it more as a hobby. Thus, the stakes aren't horrendously high, it's just me doing my best to learn, and now something I can show everyone here too. So, we clarified the general direction we're going for. The next thing we're going to be considering is who's going to be using your reference and whether it's for a short-term or long-term project. As an example, think one-off illustrations from individual artists versus works that may require more consistency. Here's a list of where character references may show up. When it comes to VTubing, sometimes a reference can just be there for anyone who's interested in making some fan art. Other times, a VTuber may want to have more brand consistency, this being more relevant for the types of commissions they seek out. So, a good reference for them may be one that captures their style and overall vibe with a greater accuracy. If we go to categories such as animation and comics, these can be even more demanding as you have the bigger task of redrawing them constantly. And of course, keeping them recognizable, distinct, cohesive within a cast of characters. Oh my gosh. As for 3D modeling, while it's true you won't be redrawing the character once it's made, there is a greater level of permanence to it. So, all that pre-work is still very much necessary, this being the actual design and creation of a usable reference. If you have a demanding project, here's a list of types of references that may come in handy. Skynix provided a tip where you can't leave anything up for interpretation when it comes to animation. I imagine the same sentiment exists for anything you hope to be consistent, whether it's for fan artists or team members. Here are some examples that were shared with me, though I 100% recommend you search these terms up yourself and make your own little collection of inspiration. Let's do another check-in with my project. I can confirm that I don't currently have a big interest in animation, comics, or anything like that. At least when it comes to me making it. One day, sure, though for now, I feel like I've been more in the ideation phase, where I'm still getting attached to my characters and stories. So, if I wanted to pursue further work with this, it's all again more for the sake of learning and improving my skills in general. It's a good to know for sure, especially if I get hooked on an idea, or maybe if I want to help out someone else with their vision. I'd love to hear from everyone too, what they're currently working on and what they might like to do in the future as well, if any of this is interesting. We considered the level of professionalism you might want to have, as well as the type of project you might be working on. The next thing to clarify is how frequently you plan to update this reference, as well as time constraints. When you've just made a character, it can be hard to say whether you're able to capture everything you wanted or even how attached to the character you'll be. It's times like these where you need to consider how much design work you plan to do and if you're still more in that concept art stage versus something with more finality. When there's other people involved too, like say a part of a team, sometimes it's just more practical to have something that's more of a placeholder that captures the basics. Something to be worked on later. For something like Art Fight, you're probably working with a lot of designs and a looming deadline of sorts. In that case, it's more about having something out there versus nothing at all. If you know in your heart that it's just a work in progress, this makes it easier because no, your reference does not need to be perfect, and in fact, striving for that at the wrong time can just mean more work later on as you develop the concept more. So, embrace the roughness, get feedback, or try out different looks in the meantime while things are still flexible. When I look back at what I made, one critical thing came to mind. This was the first time I ever drew this character. So, while I did set off originally to make a ref-like depiction of him, this was actually more of a concept art exercise and getting an initial idea developed. Even if I had spent more time polishing it, it was honestly nice having the chance to sit with it for longer and think about what was really important for him. Oh, and how does this tie in with the whole deadline thing? It's just accepting when to let go, let it be, even when it's rough. And to know that you'll be able to make changes later on. Hopefully. Depends on what kind of deadline you're working with, I guess. The next question. Will your character be wearing different outfits? Even if it's not necessarily a part of your plan, would you like to make it so it could be an option for the future? This is one of those early decisions that I think can be pretty important for the direction you take your reference. When designing with this in mind, it means you're going to need to make a base that accurately captures the body type of your character. For me, I enjoy making use of form-fitting clothes most cases, though it can depend again on what precisely you need to bring clarity to. Once you've created this base, you can then draw on top of it and design away with all sorts of outfits. If desired, of course. Without this, sometimes it means you can get trapped with a design, especially if there's more work put into it, like with a VTuber model, for example. By investing time in a good base, you'll have more future flexibility and ease with changing things up. For my new reference, it was very important that I showed the arms and robotic limbs, since they were just an essential part of the character. It was just an implicit need I needed to showcase, though it's not to say that this isn't needed for ordinary designs too. All characters in the end have their unique body proportions to consider at the very least. I've already mentioned how you need to consider who's using your reference and what kind of project it's for, though one important thing to also consider, the accessibility of your reference. A really interesting tip was brought up by a person named Azalotus. He worked in the game industry, and they emphasized how it was important to make sure everything was clearly stated, even without text. This could even include things like images of materials next to character clothing, for example. As for VTubing, they pointed out how common it is to work with people who speak different languages. During the workshop stream, Charlie had even pointed out how text within an image can be harder to translate than text that's just placed separately in a description. It's not to say that an ideal reference has no text at all. It's more just about reflecting on who may be using it and how universal you hope for it to be. When you are including text, it will of course need to be readable too. After learning this, I decided I'd stick with no text. After doing my investigations and compiling my thoughts here, I think I know what makes a good character reference. In the end, yeah, there is no one right way to make one, though as YouTuber Sarah Syrup says, it's more important to know exactly what you want to showcase. Whether it's outfits, abilities, story elements, or anything else, plan it out before you invest a lot of time in making your reference. Given how many types of references and situations there are that could warrant their use, it's perfectly okay to redo or make more than one sheet for your character, especially when you think about the scope of what you actually need to show. So let's treat this all as a good starting point. Here is a compiled list of questions that you can ask yourself if you're about to start a character reference. Is it personal or professional? Is it for a long-term project? Do you plan on updating the design frequently? Do you have a pressing deadline? How consistent do you want others to be with your design? Will people of different languages be using your reference? Are multiple views needed? What parts are most important to you or the character? Do you want future outfit flexibility? Here's another set of questions too, this time for references you've already started or are near completing. Can people make out the details? Does your character blend in with the background? Does the layout make sense or feel cluttered? If text is used, is it readable? Are the proportions consistent between different views? If the character has complex features, are they clearly defined from different angles? Do the facial expressions or poses convey the character's personality effectively? Does the reference sheet match the tone of the project? Can people using the reference color pick easily, either directly from the design or from a palette? That about covers it. Having these questions as well as getting feedback really helped out, and I hope it'll be the same for you too. I'm super satisfied with how he turned out, and I can't wait to make use of it for a proper illustration. I did mention in the previous video that I'd talk a bit about him, though I think I'll save more of that for another video. For now, I can say, yes, he has a name, it's Aaron, and yes, there is lore, and I'm very, very happy with it. I even designed 2 more characters that are connected to him, as well as tying him in with some other character designs I've made for this shared universe here. So if you want to see some cool artwork and hear more about them in the future, please subscribe. I'm all about having a good time over here, and I'd love to connect with more artists who enjoy this sort of thing. OC rambling. It's just a delight, you know? See you next time.